So, question of the day, what does the SpaceX IPO, the war in Iran, flock security, surveillance, Palantir, the drought in the southwest in the Rio Grande River Basin and the Colorado River drainage, and El Nino all have in common? Answer? I have no fucking idea, but they're all happening at the same time. So that's cause for concern right there, don't you think? I'm Roy Arthur. This is Unbelievable Reality Podcast. We're going to take a few minutes here and try to dive into a few of these things to try to make sense of them. Always a literary reference before I get started. Usually it's something significant and heavy, i.e. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, or any of the books you see collected behind me. But just for fun, today, I recommend the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. The world events right now are so depressing. Literally, it is so depressing on a daily basis. It seems like we get nothing but a litany of bad news. And the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows is just fun. Here's my reference for today. Kubiko. A state of exhaustion inspired by senseless tragedies and acts of violence, which force you to abruptly revise your expectations of what can happen in this world, trying to prop yourself up like an old scarecrow who's bursting at the seams, yet powerless to do anything but stand there and watch. Kubiko, an obscure sorrow for today. Too good. Just too good. So, but being a patched together scarecrow that I am in my later years, I have that feeling often, just standing there and watching as this just goes by. Let's start with the SpaceX IPO. If there was ever a bigger financial travesty played on the American public than the SpaceX IPO, we have no record of it. This is a one-off. This is a company that created its own valuation out of thin air, just came up with a random number of $1.7 trillion. A company that's never made a profit actually lost $5 billion in 2025 and is on track to lose $10 billion in 2026. A company that exists solely on government contracts. So far, Google hasn't knocked on their door asking them to shoot satellites into space. Wait a minute, that would be their own company, Starlink, which is connected to SpaceX, who's paying their own company to shoot their satellites into space for their own business model. That right there tells you how convoluted and twisted and absurd this is. SpaceX came out with an initial IPO of $165 a share, which is just a number somebody picked out of the air. I don't know, $165 a share. They then issued 3 billion shares. 3 billion. Of those 3 billion, only 5%. Best of my, and if I'm wrong on the numbers, hey, do your own research and send me a comment and tell me I'm an asshole. I don't care. We'll ballpark it. A minuscule amount were available for public trading on purpose, because finite amounts lead to higher costs. It's just the rule of life. The less there is, the more it costs. Be that Ferraris, gold, you name it. Pick something. Avocados. Don't give a shit. The less there is of something, the more people are willing to pay for it. So by structuring this so that the minority of shares are available for public trading, that's a way to manipulate the stock, number one. Number two, in order for this IPO to happen on a company that's in debt, that's never had a profit, that doesn't have a P&E ratio because you have to make money profit against earnings, to have a ratio, they actually have one. It's in excess of 100. If you don't know anything about business or stock values, once again, look it up. That's really, really bad. But for all of this to happen, the NASDAQ had to twist itself into knots and break every rule that has ever existed for an IPO in the history of the NASDAQ stock exchange, which I will say flat out is the most manipulated stock exchange in the world. This makes the Chinese stock exchange look reliable. The NASDAQ's a joke. It has no legitimacy, no reliability, and no credibility. And they just proved it by allowing this IPO. What does that mean to you is the bottom line here in all of this. What's that mean to me, the average American? Well, by kicking off the IPO, allowing the IPO to skirt the normal, what they call settling time, or there's another term for it that escapes me. Normally, you have to wait a year for the stock to adjust to the ebbs and flows of the market and to prove its value. In the case of SpaceX, they only have to wait 15 days. And in reality, it was only 48 hours before they could be added to the NASDAQ 100. What is the NASDAQ 100? That is the top 100 companies listed on the NASDAQ exchange. They are all combined into a fund. A fund. The NASDAQ 100 fund. Now, things like 401k investment companies, pension funds, retirement accounts, they traditionally invest in index funds because by spreading the risk out through a large number of companies, you reduce your risk. If you bet everything on one company, that company fails, everything fails. If you invest in 100 companies all at the same time and 1 or 10 fail, the law of averages says the fund is still going to stay relatively healthy. SpaceX blows that to shit. Because now you just added cancer into the fund of what is supposedly supposed to be healthy companies to begin with. Now, I disagree on how healthy these companies are, but I'm not a stock guy. That's for your financial advisor to explain to you, not me. The point is, it should never be allowed to happen. Why? Why, you ask? Because the management companies that manage 401ks, that manage pension funds, that manage retirement funds for school districts, for teachers, they're legally obligated to invest in those funds, those top 100 funds. The S&P 500 is a great example. One of the most consistent funds that there has ever been in the history of the stock world since the invention of the stock market. Closely monitored by the New York Stock Exchange, which told SpaceX to suck a tit because they're not going to break their rules for Elon Musk. But NASDAQ said we will. So now, immediately, with no proof of value, once again, there's usually a settling period of a year for a stock to prove that it's worth what it was sold for. In this case, that's been shortened to 14 days. No stock can prove anything in that period of time. But your retirement fund is legally obligated to buy that stock, which artificially inflates the value. So you've heard me use the word artificial already 3 or 4 times, because that's what this IPO is. It's artifice. If you don't know what that word means, Google it. Except now AI runs Google. Anyway, that's another story. It's fake. The valuation's fake. The company really, honestly, on paper, is probably worth about $600 billion. Not 1.7 trillion. An example, case in point, Apple, I believe, is valued at 1.2 trillion. That's Apple. Apple. Apple's been making a profit and growing in value every year for 30 years. Let that sink in for a minute. Summary on the SpaceX IPO is this. It's a ripoff. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a desperate grab for cash because SpaceX is broke. And by selling shares, they've now created liquidity that Elon Musk can borrow against. Debt stacked on debt. That's what this is. And the frightening thing about the NASDAQ breaking all their rules is that now they've done it for SpaceX, they'll do it for other IPOs because they have to. Because these are the new rules now. So when Anthropic does their IPO, they're next, or OpenAI, they're next. One of the two is going to win the race to be the next IPO. Their valuations are going to be through the roof. Once again, neither company has ever made a single profit. Never made a dime. They're so in debt, they're struggling just to survive. And they're surviving on a Ponzi scheme of investment from the people that they're buying products from. NVIDIA is invested in Anthropic and OpenAI while they're selling chips to the data centers that Anthropic and AI has to use, which are managed and built by Oracle, who's invested as well, for OpenAI and Anthropic to exist. Microsoft, Google, Meta, NVIDIA, Oracle, Amazon, everybody's invested in everybody else. And they keep buying contracts for services and goods from each other. So they're basically just sending the money in a giant circle. And now Elon Musk is part of that circle. So they're not really creating new money, is the point. What they're doing is they're borrowing each other's money to inflate their balance sheets to make them look healthier and more worthy of investment than they actually are. That's the AI bubble that everybody keeps talking about. All of these stocks are artificially inflated through mutual agreement to buy each other's products and services. So a great example is before the IPO, Microsoft signed a contract for $900 billion with SpaceX, who's building now going into the data center construction business in addition to shooting rockets into the sky. Microsoft just signed a contract with them, which now SpaceX can use the contract to borrow against and put it on their balance sheet as a profit, when in reality, nothing has actually happened. Microsoft hasn't received any goods. SpaceX hasn't produced any goods. Do you see the conflict here? Do you understand in layman's terms? This is selling the flour to the bakery, selling them the flour to make the donuts, and then you go buy the donuts from the bakery, which they use the money from the donuts that you just bought to pay you for the flour that they sold you to make the donuts. Do you get it? No money really changed hands. It did on paper, but in reality, I sold it to them, then I bought it back, then I sold it to them again, and then I bought it back. And in the middle, the guy making the donuts is taking a chunk of it. That's a Ponzi scheme. A great example, if you don't have any history, if you don't remember anything, which most fucking Americans don't, look up the Enron scandal. Enron, E-N-R-O-N. The Enron collapse. This is that on a gargantuan scale. That's it on the SpaceX IPO. Moving on. Yesterday, announcement, there's been a peace deal brokered with Iran to end the war. Somebody forgot to tell the Israelis that this happened, or they did tell the Israelis, and the Israelis, who caused this war in the first place, said, fuck that, we don't agree, we're not in on the agreement, so we're going to keep eradicating southern Lebanon, just like we just did with Palestine and Gaza. They're just continuing on. So the war is not stopping. Apparently, the Pakistanis brokered this deal between the United States and Iran, leaving Israel out of it. That's a problem for Iran because Iran says there's no deal unless Israel gets the hell out of Lebanon. Israel says they're not going to do that. But Trump says, look at me, I made the greatest deal in the history of the world, which is going to keep the Iranians from building nuclear weapons. Wait a minute. Obama did that back in 2009. That's right. Trump tore up that deal in 2016. And now we're in 2026 and he just did the same deal again that he tore up that was working. But the Iranians haven't signed the deal. And there's no proof that they will comply. Because if you're Iran, why would you? The reality of this is that we've just spent 3 months and $150 billion. Let me give you an idea of what $150 billion means. $150 billion would buy free school lunch for every child in America. In America, every single kid. Free school lunch for 10 years. 10 years. Every single child. We just blew that in 3 months on a war we started that we have lost, and we gained nothing from it other than destroying our own economy as well as the global economy. We don't understand right now in the United States the consequences of this Iranian nightmare. We are going to. It hasn't happened yet. Through skillful manipulation, increasing ethanol constraints to 15% instead of 10 additives to your gasoline, which is killing your car. That's a previous podcast. You should watch it. By doing artificial things, we've been able to keep gas prices to where they've only rose on average by 80 cents a gallon. But we're out of options. So in a month, they say mid-July, they're going to start going up again. What does that mean? When gas prices go up, it doesn't just affect your car. It affects your groceries. It affects everything that is delivered by a gasoline-powered vehicle. That can be a ship, that can be a boat, that can be a train, that can be a truck, that can be a car. That's DoorDash, to make it simple. When you start seeing it costs an extra $1.50 to get your DoorDash delivered, you're like, well, why Iran? When you go to fill up your gas tank and gas is $5.50 a gallon, Iran. When your car starts running like shit in 6 months because the additional ethanol in there, which burns inefficiently and actually decreases our mileage, Iran. when there's no crops to harvest in the fall because the Strait of Hormuz was closed for 3 months, and that's where 20% of the world's fertilizer comes from, Iran. All of these things are happening, and they're going to get worse. And what do we have to show for it? Ask yourself that simple question. What do I, as an average American, have to show for us starting a war that I didn't want, that had no visible reason, that had no outcome, that only cost us more money that we don't have? Ask yourself that question. I don't care if you're red or blue or green or yellow. If you're a human being that can tie your fucking shoes, this should be pretty obvious. So, the peace deal, maybe. Will it hold? Highly doubtful. Why? Boys with toys, they can't help but use them, and our government is currently run by idiots. The only thing that the people in our federal government are interested in right now is making as much money as they can before it's too late. The end. Flock security. Flock security is funded by Palantir. If you don't know about Palantir by now, let me give you one example that should really make you very, very anxious. Because one thing that's been proven time and time again throughout the course of history, not just current, but forever, is that military technology always comes home. Always. And that military technology is always used against civilians. Always. It's already happened here in this country. Look at how well armed ICE is. Where do you think that technology came from? Palantir was responsible for all of the targeting, i.e., where do we point the missiles? In the genocide in Gaza and the complete and utter annihilation of an entire country. They were responsible for that. They are responsible for the targeting in Lebanon. They were responsible for the targeting at the beginning of the Iran war. Obviously, they did a pretty shitty job because it didn't work. Iran still exists. As does Hezbollah and as does Hamas. See, you cannot eradicate ideology. You can blow up buildings, you can bomb bridges, you can blow up dams and drain reservoirs, but you can't kill thought. You can't kill thought, and you can't kill belief. You can try, but all it does is add more thought and more belief. It's a self-defeating cycle that for some reason humanity's never been able to understand. But that's the truth. Palantir is the most dangerous company in the history of the world, and it's run by two complete lunatics who believe that democracy has failed and that the future of Western civilization, not just here, but all of it, that means all of Europe as well as the United States, is better off in the hands of tech billionaires because they're the smartest guys in the room. Just ask them, they'll tell you. As a matter of fact, Alex Karp actually wrote a book very similar to another dictator wannabe who at the time was in jail for trying to overthrow a government, had a little mustache, lived in the middle of Europe, and ended up getting 50 million people killed. That book was called My Plan. In another language, Mein Kampf. Dictators can't help themselves. They love to tell you before they do it what they're gonna do. What's amusing is we never believe them. We should believe this guy because he's fucking nuts. This is, in my mind, This is the beauty of the paradox of the illness of Alex Karp. Alex Karp just spent $120 million in Snowmass, Colorado, in Aspen, Colorado, to buy a Benedictine monastery, a holy place that belonged to the Catholic Church for 70 years. 3,000 acres of pristine wilderness where monks used to meditate and pray for the betterment of mankind. I am not a religious man. I think it's all horse shit. Whatever. There is a significance to those people believing it, though. Technically, that was holy ground. This is the same guy that laughs in a stockholder meeting and says that, occasionally we have to kill people, but it's kind of fun because they're bad guys. This is a guy that brags about murdering people who just bought a religious sanctuary. Please try to help me figure that conflict out. That should tell you everything you need to know about this megalomaniac and his business partner, Peter Thiel, who funded J.D. Vance's run for the Senate, the most expensive Senate run in history, to the tune of $15 million. Who J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, was who J.D. Vance worked for before he became a U.S. Senator, before he miraculously became the pick for Vice President of the United States, who happens to sit one chair away from the red button, who happens to do exactly what he's told to do by his master. And his master runs the most evil, intrusive, dangerous surveillance company in history. And it gets better because Flock Security was funded by Peter Thiel. So the company that now has surveillance cameras, audio, infrared, and bragging now about their ability to connect to your Ring system in your private home, as well as your television set in your private home, is all part of Palantir. And if you look deep enough, you'll find that Palantir is the biggest investor in the 5 hyperscale data centers being built in the United States right now. Are you starting to see how all of these pieces are actually not pieces? They're all connected in the spider web of the world we currently live in. So the world that we currently live in, let's take a quick minute and try to pull back and see it from above. When I was growing up as a kid, the words communist and socialist were right up there with fuck as far as dirty words in the United States of America. I think communist was worse. And then, of course, you can add in all of the LGBTQ slang and horrific terminology that I grew up with, which was common everyday conversation. That's how those people were treated. I'm not going to repeat those terms, those words. You've all heard them. You all know what I'm talking about. But I grew up in a time where all we did was talk about how the Russians and the East Germans and the Chinese monitored their people, and they had files on everybody, and they knew exactly what you did and where you go and who your friends are and what political parties you were affiliated with. Shit, they knew what you had for dinner. And that was the big scary thing. Ooh, we don't want to be in a communist country because they're going to be spying on us all the time. wait a minute. We now live in a country where we're being spied on all the time. Every time you fire up your computer to do a Google search, it's recorded. Every time you send a text, every time you make a phone call, every time you watch television, every time you turn your alarm system on or off. What's happening in the United States is what's called surveillance capitalism. Capitalism, this old structure that a bunch of drunk white guys, let's get real, got together in 1776 and came up with an idea to get rid of the British overlords because they wanted more land, which at that time was how you got more money, and the British were in the way. That's the summary. It wasn't about no taxation without representation. It wasn't about throwing tea in Boston Harbor. No. It was about the fact that the British signed a deal with the natives that we would not cross the mountains into the Ohio River Valley. And the old drunk white guys, the founding fathers, had been, George Washington in particular, into the Ohio River country, and he wanted it. They wanted it because they depleted the soils in the South and shit as far north as the Mason-Dixon line by growing crops, cotton and tobacco specifically, that just kill the soil. They just literally suck the nutrients right out of the soil. And so that's what they really wanted. That's what this country was founded on, capitalism. The ability to extract and exploit. And if you get in the way, we eradicate you. Capitalism really hasn't changed much in 250 years now, has it? We still exploit migrant workers. 15% of our workforce is migrants, illegal immigrants. The very people that Stephen Miller is so hell-bent on getting rid of are the ones that put food on our table. They're the ones that build the houses that we live in. Those undesirables. And now, apparently, anybody that's not part of this twisted, weird Project 2025 white nationalist Christian political agenda is we're all illegal immigrants. None of us should live here. If you're a progressive, if you're a leftist, shit, if you're a conservative Republican, you're on the hate list. The people that are on the good list, it's about that big. All the rest of us, we're just a bunch of interlopers that need to be controlled or gotten rid of. That's it. Because capitalism is running into a problem. And that problem is there's nothing left to extract. We've already cut down all the forests. Now we want to cut down our national forest because there's no other trees. We've already dug up the gold, the oil, the Permian Basin. You can't hardly find an acre to put a well on, but they're trying. That's where fracking came from. Being able to go out with your pumps instead of just straight down. A concept too complicated for the average American. Once again, people that can barely tie their own shoes, they believe all this scary shit, so they vote red, and that's why we're in this fucking mess to begin with. But not entirely. Because, see, capitalism runs through both political parties. Because money equals power. And human beings lust, ultimately, for power. To be more than just us. We want to lord it over others to prove we matter more than they do. In this case, that would be you and me. And it's ugly stuff. So what does all this, how does all this connect? I had a list when I started the podcast. We're getting to the end of the list. The other pieces of this terrifying puzzle. Right now, literally the western half of the United States, and it's not just the western half. Let's just say everything west of the eastern seaboard, which ironically is the original 13 colonies, that's a laugh, and the Ohio River Valley, everything west, including the Mississippi River, is running out of water. We just had the lowest recorded snowpack in history, in recorded history. In 150 years of snow, last winter was the worst. Period, the end, in the west. Now in the east, they got snow out the ass in Chicago. Doesn't do much good for us out here in the west. In the west, west of the Mississippi, and all the way up into the headwaters of the Mississippi, just here, for most people, so you understand, because people don't, the Mississippi River starts in Minnesota, and actually the water from the Mississippi comes from the boundary area between the United States and Canada, and from the Missouri River system, which is what Lewis and Clark followed on their way to the Pacific coast. Those two drainages form into the mighty Mississippi, which, by the way, transports 60%. 60% of all of the produce, and that includes wheat, corn, rye, vegetables, you name it. 60% of the produce in the United States of America goes down the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is at an all-time low. In addition to that, the Rio Grande River, which starts in the mountains of Colorado and runs all the way to Mexico. You know all about it because that's where the phrase wetbacks came from. Getting wet swimming across the Rio Grande from Mexico to the United States. That river's running out of water. I'm going to explain how bad. And then, of course, there's the Colorado River drainage. The Colorado River is where we get all of our fruits and vegetables from California. That's where all their water comes from. How bad is it? Right now, the largest reservoir on the Rio Grande is Elephant Butte Reservoir in southern New Mexico. It is at 9% capacity. You can't understand it unless you Google imagery to actually see it. If you see it, you will be absolutely shocked. Lake Powell, which drains into Lake Mead. Lake Powell is so low, 26% capacity. If Lake Powell falls another 10 feet, it will no longer be able to generate electricity. Because that big dam, the Glen Canyon Dam, has turbines in it. I've been there. I've fished the water, Lee's Ferry, right below the dam. Looked up at the dam from the very bottom. I have stood at the bottom of that dam. Inside that dam are 14 massive turbines. Those turbines generate electricity for 4.5+ million people. Of the 14, only 6 are running today. You go down to Lake Mead. Lake Mead is right outside of Las Vegas. That's where Las Vegas gets all of its water. They're saying by the 1st of September there will not be enough water in Lake Mead to turn the turbines in Lake Mead, in Hoover Dam. Because once again, inside that dam, and I've been there, I've actually been there, I've stood on that dam. Inside there are massive turbines that generate, again, electricity for another 6.5 million people. So now you have electricity for 11 million minimum. And this is minimum because we're not just talking about people, we're talking about businesses. electricity generation that's coming to an end. Right now, Lake Mead, as of 5 days ago, was at 24% capacity. When it drops another 10 feet, water, this is where it gets really scary. Water stops flowing out of the spillway. There's not enough water to reach the hole to drain out, to go to California. This shit's real. This is happening right now. This has been happening to the Colorado River system for 30 years. And it's been ignored. It's been fought over by the 7 states that make up the Colorado River Compact, that all share water from that one river system. They can't agree on who gets what and when and how much. Still. And the federal government hasn't stepped in and said, this is what we're going to do. It's fucking mess. And it's a big problem. What does this have to do with data centers and AI? First of all, AI is a cover for the data center builds. We're not building these centers because AI needs more wattage to compute. That's not true. That's not true at all. We need these data centers because of all the data we're capturing to build a surveillance state that will make Russia and China and East Germany look like wannabes. There are cameras everywhere. Everywhere you go in this country. You cannot get away from them. And they're all capturing data on us. For 2 reasons. In my opinion. Once again, my opinion. Number 1, so they can figure out how to sell us more shit. Really? Amazon, Google, eBay, they're all using this data to figure out how to sell you more shit. Walmart, Target. That's what they want this data for. So they know what to sell you and how to sell you more things that you don't need, but subconsciously you want, because we're an envious little group of monkeys as well. But the drought is going to be compounded by the fact that these data centers take massive amounts of water to fuel these huge banks of processors. The best way to see, it's not and let's stop calling them data centers. What they are is surveillance centers. They're surveillance centers. That's all they exist for, is to capture surveillance data. Period. There's already enough compute for AI, or it wouldn't already work. But it does work. It's working relatively well. Except for the fact that there's so much garbage going in that it can't tell what's truth from fiction. That's a whole nother podcast on why AI is overhyped, overpromised, and failing massively to deliver. But over 4 million people have already lost their jobs on the promise of AI making us more efficient so we can make more shit to feed the consumption, so we can continue to exploit the only resource left, which is you and me. Now, the final component to all of this madness that's all happening right now, today, is the super El Nino that is formed in the Pacific Ocean that's already started. The weather is going to get different, is the best way to put it. In some places, there's going to be massive drought. And this is global, people. You need to understand. Things are no longer local. Things are no longer country by country. Whether anybody likes it or not, we live in a global society now. Okay? Everything's connected. Think back to COVID. Where did our masks come from? Where did our gowns come from? Where did our vaccines come from? China, our enemy? That's where your phone came from. This very camera I'm shooting this on was built in China and sold in the United States. It's a global world now. This illusion of borders is a joke. It's an old archetype that's broken. We just can't accept it because we're tribal monkeys, most of all. And we're not very smart. Technology has so far outpaced human behavior, it's laughable. Yeah, sure, we can shoot rockets. We can send people on a meaningless trip around the moon. We can build smart cars that'll surveil you constantly while you drive them with cameras, biometric sensors, etc. by law in the United States. But we're still the same stupid ass people that Marcus Aurelius wrote about in ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. People haven't changed at all. Our toys have. And so they've made us that much more destructive and dangerous. The most dangerous thing on the planet is humanity. Just ask all the extinct species. They're gone. And yet here we are. And we're never satisfied. We always want more. The monkeys always want the next bright, shiny thing. So what does El Nino mean on top of all this other calamity? It means broken food supplies. It means severe weather events, the likes of which we've never experienced. The last recorded instance of an El Nino of this severity, and it was less than. It killed 50 million people globally. And back then, that was 5% of humanity. 5%. It was almost worse than the Black Plague. And now it's happening again. And it's happening now. And we are fucking around with IPOs. We are denying that the climate has changed and that it's our fault. We still go to Target and buy shit we don't need. We still want the newest gadget. We still don't get it. But you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it when you go to the grocery store and you can't buy beans or rice or flour or beef or chicken or pork or eggs or milk or orange juice. I could just go on until I ran out of ideas. What's the summary on all this? I really don't know. I'm just one guy. But I know that we've forgotten the most important thing about being humans, and that is being responsible for the world that our children are going to inherit. And to me, that is the greatest tragedy of all. As a father, I feel guilty because I haven't done more to try to do a better job to give them a chance at a better future. You wonder why young men are falling apart. You wonder why our society's so fractured, so broken, why nobody can get along anymore, why we don't meet anymore, why we don't have parties anymore like we used to, why we're not a community like we used to. It's because we quit caring. We quit paying attention. We're busy paying attention to what our phone tells us to watch. And that is the greatest tragedy of all. What have we done to the world that we're leaving for our children? Think about that when you go to bed tonight. Because in the end, we only have our own selves to blame. Anyway, this is Unbelievable Reality Podcast. I am Roy Arthur. As I always say, if you don't like my opinions or what I have to say, then don't fucking watch. If you do, why don't you do something different and engage? Subscribe, comment, share, have a voice, matter, do something. Don't just watch. Participate. I dare ya.